member for Lalor.
I thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise to join my colleagues in supporting Labor's cost of living tax cuts. They are cost of living relief and tax reform. As the Prime Minister has said, Labor has been very concerned about the cost of living impacts on families, on individuals, on Australians around the country. And of course, on this side of the House, we have been critically concerned with those. No, none more so than myself, representing a community in the outer west of Melbourne where most people in my community have a mortgage. And so watching the interest rate rises and having an understanding of the impact of that and what that means for many, many in my community, I have been incredibly concerned. And I've been very proud to be part of the Albanese Labor government where we have all the members of our cabinet, all the members of the executive, all the members of the backbench critically concerned about these things and working collaboratively together across 20 months of government to find ways to put in place supports for people. And it began, after we were first elected in that December, when caucus members here came back to Canberra to fix what we saw was going to happen, to bring in legislation to push downward pressure on energy prices. From that point, the Australian public were in good hands because we had a cabinet that were going to work together to find ways to support Australians. And we saw it again. We saw it again in health. We saw it with the cheaper medicines, and I know on the ground what that means in my community. I know on the ground what that means in my house. That when you go to the chemist, when you're on long-term medications, you're getting longer scripts, and there are more scripts on the PBS, and all medicines are cheaper than they were. This was critical and has made a real difference on the ground. And of course, then tripling the bulk billing incentives, which is turning around the bulk billing rates across the country, and those bulk billing rates are reversing in the electorate of Lalor. We introduced an increase to the rental subsidy. We did the childcare support package. This government has been focused on reducing the pressure on families across the country. And today, the legislation before us is the introduction of Labor's tax cuts, cost of living relief. And this is a critical piece of legislation because it will deliver to every Australian taxpayer a tax cut, first and foremost. And it's hard to use that language of a tax cut for me because it isn't the tax cut. It's actually the increase in your pay packet because less tax has been taken. So it's going to give families in my electorate, everyone in my electorate, more disposable income at a time when they really need it. And importantly, it doesn't have an inflationary impact. And this, of course, is critical because we're still fighting inflation. So in Lalor, there are 95,000 taxpayers who will be getting a tax cut from July 1 under this package that is being introduced, as the Prime Minister said, because it's the right decision made at the right time in response to a cost of living pressures. 88% of the taxpayers in Lalor will be better off under Labor's Stage 3 tax system. 84,000 taxpayers will be better off. And we've heard speaker after speaker go through what that means. And we heard the member for O'Connor talking about teachers and police officers and rental properties. Well, I tell you what I can tell teachers and police officers in my electorate. From July 1, under this government, you will have more in your pockets because of these tax cuts. More in your pockets than you would have had under the Liberal plan, more in your pockets from July 1. Not just teachers, not just police officers, the nurses, the aged care workers, the childcare workers, those who work in transport and logistics, the forklift drivers, the truck drivers, the bus drivers, people working in retail, people working in building and construction, people working in the public sector. There isn't a gamut across my electorate where this won't have a positive impact. And as I said here in another opportunity last week, I know that on July 1 I can look the people in my community in the eye, because, like thousands of other Australians who, under the Morrison tax cuts, would have received a larger tax cut, I am pleased that this decision means that families in my community, that young people in my community, that women in my community will get more money in their pockets rather than mine. I can't be blunter than that. And I know that that's a sentiment shared across the country, because that's what we're hearing. The incoming, coming back to me, from families, from people I know outside my electorate, people who earn $200,000 plus, is that they are happy that this is happening. And there's no denying that that is real. And to those opposite, I say, it would be nice, as the Treasurer said today, if you were enthusiastically supporting this legislation. Probably too much to hope for. So I'm pleased that the member for O'Connor, at least, has expressed quite clearly that he's pleased. The speech wasn't overwhelmingly positive, but he's pleased to support this because he knows the difference it will make to people in his electorate who earn $40,000 a year, because it means something where they were going to get nothing. So they may not be enthusiastic, but I welcome them reluctantly supporting the tax cuts and reluctantly supporting this. But I do wonder, and there's been a lot of talk in here this evening about what we've talked about in this place across 20 months. I'll tell you what we've talked a lot about. We've talked a lot about cost of living. We've talked a lot about, on this side, the things that we've been doing to address cost of living, to assist people in that cost of living, while, as a government and as a country, we fight inflation. That's what we've heard a lot about. Do you know what else we've heard a lot about? We've had a lot of questions from the other side. A lot of questions from the other side about energy bills. A lot of questions across 20 months. Unfortunately, they all came in December and voted against things that were designed to put downward pressure on energy bills. So any question they ask on energy bills completely loses credibility and validity, as far as I'm concerned. But I note that in the past 2 weeks, since the Prime Minister stood up at the Press Club and explained his decision and our processes to get to this place, I note that there's a complete lack of interest from that side of the chamber on the impacts of cost of living on residents around this country. It is glaring that it's suddenly not of interest to those opposite. Now, one of the things I'm concerned about with that is that people might think that the cost of living pressures have gone away, and of course they haven't. And as the Prime Minister has also said, this legislation brings some relief, some reform around bracket creep, some reform around taxation to support people, but it's not the job finished. It's not the job finished. The inflationary pressures are still there, moderating but still there. People are still doing it tough. I'm really proud to be a member of the Albanese Labor government, to work with the members of the government on this side who are so concerned about these pressures, and to support a cabinet who are prepared to work together to find ways to support Australians in communities like mine and communities across this country. I'm really proud that, as a government, we've demonstrated that we can chew gum and walk at the same time, deal with an inflationary crisis and care for people, and more importantly, meet our commitment not to leave people behind. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.